Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing dumper emotions versus dumpee emotions. I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details. www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing dumper emotions versus dumpee emotions. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you don't need me to tell you that you are on an emotional roller coaster. You're up, you're down, but unfortunately most of the time you're spinning round and round. It's quite often the fact that dumpees will wonder when will this turmoil ever end, and they wonder how their ex, the dumper, is feeling at this time as well. In today's podcast, I'm going to be splitting up the likely dumper and dumpee emotions into 3 points so you can see how most relationships, breakups and aftermaths tend to follow the path that I will speak of. Of course, nothing can be guaranteed, and of course there is no way for certain of knowing how your ex is actually feeling, but the likelihood is your ex, the dumper, will follow this path and they will be versed by the path that I would describe that you will likely go on as well. This is dumper emotions versus dumpee emotions. So let's get straight into this. And number 1 is relieved versus distraught. So at the time of a breakup, we have a situation where the person who ended the relationship is now the dumper. And unfortunately for the dumpee, I have to tell you, they are likely feeling relieved at this time. Now, when you two were in a relationship, when you were both feeling a high level of romantic emotional attraction for one another, neither of you could have imagined splitting up and certainly not feeling relieved about it. But we have to understand that a breakup takes place when the romantic emotional attraction level drops for the person who eventually becomes the dumper. And when it hits that certain low point, they action the breakup, they end the relationship. And this is where you become the dumpee and they become the dumper. And they feel relieved because they were not feeling fulfilled. They were not feeling that this relationship was going on the path that was going to make them feel happiness, satisfaction, and ultimately the route that they want to take their life. That doesn't mean that's how they always felt. Of course, they were together with you in a relationship. They didn't think that at all. And it also doesn't mean this is how they will feel forevermore. But what we have to understand at the time of a breakup, the dumper is likely feeling relieved because they probably didn't want to go through this at all. They probably was thinking, how can I go on a different path? How can I take my life in a different journey without causing the drama and the upset that I'm going to have to do so? And there is no way out. If you want to end a relationship, there's no way of escaping the fact that you're going to be causing turmoil, pain and anguish. So when a dumper is thinking about ending a relationship, they will likely be going through some stressful emotions, thinking, what can I do here to try to lessen the impact of this earthquake that is about to take place? And when they get over that hill, when they get over that mountain that they see in front of them of ending the relationship, they initially feel relieved. Now, as for dumpee, you will likely be feeling distraught. Again, I probably don't need to be telling you this right now. If you're listening, you might be at this point. You might be at point number 1 where you're feeling distraught. You're feeling confused. Perhaps you were blindsided and you didn't see this coming. At this time, you can't see the light at the end of a tunnel. You certainly can't imagine getting your ex back. But not only that, you can't imagine finding anybody better than them either. Sadly, there is nothing more attractive than rejection, and therefore, as the dumpee, you're putting your ex, the dumper, on a pedestal. You're basically placing them ahead of you and ahead of everybody else. They now seem to be the best person on the planet because they rejected you in your eyes. And if somebody rejects you in your subconscious, you believe they must be better than you in some way, shape or form. I'm here to tell you that is not the case. But right now, it doesn't really matter what I say to some of you who are at point number 1. You are going to be feeling sadness, and like I said, you might even be feeling distraught, as extreme as that. Always remember that you can and will get through this. Talk to your friends and family, and if you want additional support, you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one. And I can help you through breakup recovery and increase the chance of trying to get your ex back if that is something you would like to do. If you want to speak with me one-on-one via audio coaching, check out my website www.dateme.tips for more details. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about dumper emotions versus dumpee emotions. And point number 2 is energized versus stabilized. So when the dumper ends a relationship, as I said, most dumpers will be feeling relieved. They've done the task that they didn't really want to do, but they felt they had to, so they could live their life in a way that they felt would give them most fulfillment at this time. At that point, they're feeling relieved, but as we move a little bit further forward, they will start to feel energized. And this is in essence what I like to refer to as the single honeymoon period. This is where a dumper will live the life that they felt they couldn't within the relationship. Whether or not that is because you restricted these things, maybe you didn't like them, seeing certain friends, you didn't want them, spending time doing their activities, maybe it wasn't that at all. Maybe it's just the fact that they want to be living their life in a way that they didn't even really think of within the relationship. Perhaps they want to go to clubs, parties, whatever the situation may be, they are now living a life which feels energized, it feels new, it feels exciting. It certainly is different. Now, you as a dumpee, you don't want to hear this, but I'm just trying to explain to you the facts of the likelihood of what a dumper will go through. But please keep listening to the end of this podcast, because it is not all doom and gloom for you as a dumpee if you want to try to get your ex back. But right now, in point number 2, we have to go through the single honeymoon period for the dumper. They are feeling energized. They're living their life to the full. Maybe if you see things on social media, and I strongly suggest you don't follow your ex on social media. If you are connected, just don't look at what they post. Because at this time, you'll probably think they are living their best life. They're having so much fun. This is the single honeymoon period. Okay, they're energized, they're doing their thing. And right now, everything feels fresh and exciting for the dumper, but not necessarily for much longer. So now let's compare this to the dumpee. And point number 2 for the dumpee is stabilized. So if you're feeling distraught right now, the good news is round your next corner is feeling stabilized. And what this means is you're not over the moon, you're not feeling brilliant, but you're also not distraught. And progress is progress. One step forward. Take every day as it comes. Live your life the best you can. Spend time with friends, family, make new connections if you can, because this will help stabilize your mood. If you're busying yourself, if you understand that this was not completely your fault, okay, it's very unlikely that the relationship ended just down to you. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, and maybe a dumpee did something extreme which definitely caused the breakup, but more often than not, there are things that were not quite right between the dumper and dumpee, and perhaps the dumper moved forward into single life sooner than the dumpee. But we could have had a situation in an alternative universe where the dumpee ends the relationship not much after that point. You will know yourself if that could have been the case. A lot of the time it is, but unfortunately, if you were dumped first before you can dump them, this puts the pressure on you. You have the emotions of a dumpee, and this can make you feel distraught in point number 1. But the good news is that you can and will stabilize. As time moves forward, if you busy yourself, if you realize it was unlikely to be all of your fault, and even if you feel it was most of your fault or all of your fault, you need to forgive yourself at this time. Okay, yes, it's important to take accountability. Yes, it's important to do things to mitigate things happening possibly again. And yes, there are opportunities at the beginning of a breakup, you might say, when it first gets actioned, but you can apologize for anything you feel you may have done. But when you get to point number 2, when it's time to stabilize, that is the time to accept your past. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, your dumper is not perfect, so you need to forgive yourself. It comes to a point where you have to say sorry to yourself, okay? You have to accept your own apologies and then no more, okay? Because if you keep beating yourself up, you'll never be able to love yourself, and if you can't love yourself, how can anybody else be expected to love you? Point number 2 for the Dumpee is stabilization. This will come when all of these pieces of a puzzle come together, and you can and you will get there. So even if you're feeling distraught right now, please realize it is just a temporary emotion. You won't feel like this forever. Don't give up. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about dumper emotions versus Dumpee emotions. And point number 3 is thoughtful versus positive. So when we go through a single honeymoon period as a dumper, when you're feeling energized as a dumper, this doesn't last forever. The average amount of time from my research is around 6 months. It could be sooner, it could be later, but the average is around 6 months. When the single honeymoon period is over, this is when a dumper will become more thoughtful. Now, when I say it is over, what I mean is everything that was new starts to feel old. It's no longer fresh, it's no longer exciting, it's more mundane. There are only so many nightclubs and parties you can go to before it starts to wane in your mind about how good this actually feels. Whatever the situation, maybe your ex isn't even doing those types of things, but whatever they are doing, their life will no longer seem as exciting around 6 months in, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit less, but when the single honeymoon period ends, they are no longer feeling energized. And what happens then? Well, guess what? They have to look in the mirror, metaphorically, physically. They have to realize where they are right now, and they have to consider their past, because right now they've been blocking it out by living their life to the full. And that is why I suggest to a Dumpee, you try and do the same, so you can also block out these painful and passionate emotions during this time. But as a dumper, they have blocked it out most of the time, and they will now become thoughtful. They look in the mirror metaphorically, and they will see their life where they are right now, and they have to contemplate their past. Now, if you as a Dumpee has done everything right at this point, if you've not made things worse, if you've improved your chances, this is when your ex will be likely to reach out to you, because they are contemplating their past and they're thinking, right, this is the time for me just to touch base with my ex. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to necessarily mean you get back together. There is no 100% guaranteed way to get your ex back. Even if your ex reaches out, you've entered the communication stage, but there's still work to be done. Now, please don't get scared if you don't hear from your ex after 6 months. Like I said, this is just an average. You know, I've heard of dumpers reaching out to dumpees many years into the future. So this is not a definitive timeline, but it is an average. And if you hear from your ex, if you're a dumpee and you get that text from your ex, it can be very exciting, but you now need to navigate the communication stage as effectively as possible. Earlier I said this will happen if you've done everything right, and what I mean by that is that you haven't made things worse. You haven't hassled your ex, you haven't stressed them out, you haven't caused them to contemplate and think, actually, I've made the right decision. Instead, they need to contemplate and think, actually, have I made the right decision? Maybe not, I'll reach out. Again, if you want one-on-one support with your unique situation, please consider my audio coaching service. dateme.tips is the website to go to, where you can find out more details of how to speak with me one-on-one about your story, your situation. So now we are looking at the Dumpee, and we're ending on a positive, because point number 3 for the Dumpee is positive. The Dumpee is thoughtful, the Dumpee is positive. And that is because if you have lived your life in the way that I suggest as a Dumpee, you will start to come out the other side of your dark, bleak tunnel at this time. You're feeling more positive. You're becoming a version 2.0 of yourself, improving yourself every single day. And you're starting to realise that with or without your ex, you're going to be absolutely fine. Because you can and will attract new people, quite possibly better than your ex. Because if you are a version 2.0, then you can attract different, higher quality people than you could in the past when you attracted your ex. So therefore, you can and will attract more people into your life. Your positivity will be flowing. And if you're distraught right now in point number 1, you can't imagine this happening, but let me tell you, it will happen if you keep going. Don't stand still, don't clock watch, keep moving forward. And if you don't get your ex back, you will find somebody even better. Positivity is how to live your life. We can't be positive every second of every day, but if you have that in your heart and you try your best to improve and fill your time doing productive things which take you to the next level, then you can and will get to your goal. And your ultimate goal, my ultimate goal, everybody's ultimate goal is happiness and satisfaction. It's not necessarily your ex. It could be them. It could be somebody new. It could be anybody in the world that you don't even know right now. But what we can say is if you get to happiness, it doesn't matter who it is, because that's all that counts. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.